All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. So begin by thanking our sponsor, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Elul. To thank Avraham Shaindy Kelman for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of their parents. We hope that the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Shamash Shav and Aliyah, and the family Ein Nechama. We thank our week of learning sponsors, Alan Wiseman, in commemoration of the 10th yahrzeit of his beloved wife Reda, Rivka Rachel bas Zecharya, Dr. Reda and Marlene Gartenhaus in honor of their sons Harris and Simon, learning in Eretz Yisrael, and Paul and Kathy Pollack as a zechus for refuah shlaimah for Alter ben Golda Etcha. We thank all of our sponsors for their dedication, for their generosity, and also with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Daf Gimel. We are beginning on the bottom of Beis Amud Beis, Amar le Abaye, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lines up from the bottom. So just to reorient ourselves a little bit. Remember, we've been discussing the opening Mishnah Maseches Be'ah, and the Mishnah is talking about Beitzah shenolda b'yamtiv. What happens if the chicken lays the egg on Yom Tiv? What is the status of the egg? So remember, again, we had a machlokes b'shamai Beis Hillel. Beis says you're allowed to eat it. Beis Hillel says you're not allowed to eat it. We've been trying to figure out what is at the root of the machlokes Beis and Beis Hillel. So we'll actually come back to all of our opinions just a little bit, but we left off yesterday with Rabba. Rabba said it's a hachana issue. We'll say you should just know this is what's called hachana de Rabba. Hachana de Rabba. So if you're talking and learning with someone, say, oh, did you learn the sugya of Hachana de Rabba? Yeah, so did I. Great. Thanks for a good conversation. And even says the Gemara. We'll say, what does Rabba say? Rabba says that halacha l'maisa, whatever you're going to use on Shabbos and Yom Tiv must be prepared. Must be prepared. In other words, that whatever is going to be used on Shabbos it has to be prepared from weekday, and Shabbos can't prepare for Yom Tiv can't prepare for Shabbos. And therefore, again, Rabba said that halacha l'maisa, an egg is fully formed or completed being formed the day before inside of the chicken. Therefore, if the chicken lays an egg, we're talking about over here where Yom Tov falls out on Yom Tov falls out on Sunday, and therefore when the chicken lays the egg on Sunday, that egg was actually quote unquote prepared when? Shabbos. That's the problem. So I'm going to Abai says, okay, I just point out, there's a lot to talk about in that sugya of Rabbah, which we'll loop back to a little bit, including Tosis, which we'll come back to hopefully at the end of the year for a few moments. Abai says, so Abai says, okay, Rabba, even if I subscribe to your idea, this, according to you, it's only a problem. The egg is only a problem when it's Yom Tov that follows Shabbos, right? Because then halacha l'maisa what? The egg was prepared, quote unquote, on Shabbos for Yom Tov use. But a stam Yom Tov, right? A chicken lays an egg on Yom Tov, that should be totally fine. To which the Gemara says, Gzera mishum Yom Tov achar Shabbos. Because no, the Gzera is that if we allow you to eat the egg on a stam Yom Tov, right, on just a regular Yom Tov, you may come to also consume an egg that was laid on Yom Tov when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos. So it's a preventative Gzera. Okay, Shabbos ba'alma tishtari. But if the chicken lays the egg on a regular Shabbos, that should be permitted. Because also remember again, according to Rabbah, when does the hachana of an egg take place? The day before. So the problem again is only in a very specific scenario where what? Where Yom Tov falls after Shabbos. But a regular Yom Tov should be permitted. The Gemara says, no, if we let you eat it on a regular Yom Tov, you may come to eat it on a Yom Tov after Shabbos. If a chicken that lays an egg on Shabbos, that egg should be permitted on a regular Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, Gzera mishum Shabbos achar Yom Tov. The concern would be on a situation of a Shabbos that falls after Yom Tov. Okay, so the Gemara says, do we make Gezeros like this? Do we actually make Gezeros like this? So says the Gemara, well, isn't this interesting case? If a person went ahead and shechted a chicken and found eggs inside. Now again, remember, in this situation now, what are we referring to over here? Same case, you're shechting a chicken. Mutar on Yom Tiv, shecht the chicken? Yes. Now watch this case. In this case, you shechted the chicken, and then on the inside of the chicken, you found eggs. What's the halacha? So, Beitzah Gumuros, mutaros la'achlan b'yamtiv. You're permitted to eat those eggs on Yom Tiv. Now listen, this is very interesting. So it says the Gemara, Vim Isa, Ligzar mishum hanach misyalda miyomehen. Now, I will say, again, the fact that you could eat eggs found inside of a chicken, that's not a chiddush. You could eat anything found inside of a chicken. The Gemara is suggesting over here is like this. Why aren't we concerned that if we let you eat those eggs that you find inside of the chicken, what may happen? You may come to go ahead and then eat eggs on Yom Tiv that the chicken lays on Yom Tiv when Yom Tiv falls out the Shabbos. In other words, we're making all of these gezeros, right? You can't eat eggs, you can't eat the egg on a regular Shabbos because you may come to eat it on a Yom Tiv that falls after Shabbos, or Shabbos falls after Yom Tiv. You can't eat it on a regular Yom Tiv because you may come to eat it on a Yom Tiv that follows Shabbos. So along that same logic, if you shech the chicken, you find eggs inside the chicken, you shouldn't be able to eat the eggs, lest you come to eat the egg that the chicken lays on a Yom Tov after a Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, no. Amrle, Beitzim Gemuras Ima Moslo Shlicha. Finding fully formed eggs in a chicken after you shecht it is an uncommon occurrence. And both we have a general principle that Chazal only made their enactments in common situations, but they did not create their enactments for uncommon situations. So finding fully formed eggs inside of a slaughtered chicken is not a normal occurrence, and therefore Chazal were not go there. So interestingly enough, everyone would agree that halacha l'maaseh, if you shechted the chicken on Yom Tov and found fully formed eggs inside of the chicken, that you'd be permitted to go ahead and eat the eggs, and the Gesher of Rabbah or Achana de Rabbah doesn't apply. So we'll say that was Rabbah. So far again, we've got Rav Nachman's interpretation, we have Rabbah's interpretation of the Machlokes V'Shem Yisilo. Two more. Rav Yosef Amar, Gezerah mishum peros hanoshrin. Listen to this. Do you know why we don't let you eat the egg? Remember again, this is according to Beis Hillel. Why doesn't Beis Hillel allow you to eat the egg that the chicken lays on Yom Tiv? Gezerah mishum peros hanoshrin. It is a gezerah regarding trees or fruit that fall off the tree. Rabbi Yosef, this is actually very interesting. Take a look at Rashi. Rabbi Yosef Amar. Time at the base of the Golda Etcha, the Kima Beis Hillel, there's a Shver Shemina Ilam b'Shabbos. Shabbos said, listen to this. The halacha is as follows. Are you allowed to pick an apple off a tree on Shabbos? No. Av malacha of kotzer, right? Of harvesting. Harvesting means, okay, davar mimokum gidulo. You go out and you detach something from the place that it grows. What about if you're walking by and you find an apple on the ground? The apple fell off the tree, allowed to eat it? So the answer is midaraisi, yes. Midirabanan, no. Chazal did not want you eating anything that fell off a tree on Shabbos out of a concern that what? You may come to pick it off the tree on Shabbos. So this is fascinating. Rav Yosef says, do you know why you can't eat an egg that the chicken lays on Yom Tiv? It's a gzera of peros hanoshrin. It's a gzera, it's the gzera of fruit which fell off the tree. And therefore, we're concerned that halacha l'maisa, if we guide it's gzera of peros hanoshrin. So Gemara says, Taimamai. Now let's talk about this just a moment. Why can't you eat fruit which fell off a tree? And the imagery is just as the fruit falls off the tree, the egg, so to speak, falls off the mother. Now remember again, what's the reason you can't eat fruit which fell off a tree? Taimamai, top of Gimel, Gezerah Sham Ya'ala V'Yitlosh. So first of all, we'll say, what's the gzera? What's the gzera? The gzera is if we allow you to eat the apple which fell off the tree, you may come to inadvertently go ahead and pick an apple off the tree. To which the Gemara says, Hi gufa gzera, va'anam v'nekom gzera, va'ana nekom v'nigzar gzera legzera. So the Gemara says, it doesn't make any sense. In general, also we have a concept of in gozrin gzera legzera, which means you don't pile on multiple levels of rabbinic legislation, one on top of the other. So remember again, here's what I can't do. I'm not allowed to pick an apple off the tree. Okay, so Chazal came along and said, you also can't eat an apple that falls off the tree, lest you come to pick it up. And now, Rav Yosef, you're suggesting, and now you also can't eat an egg that the chicken lays on Shabbos or Yom Tiv, lest you come, because if you eat the egg, what may happen? You may come to eat a fruit that falls off the tree, which may then lead you to go ahead and detach a fruit from the tree. Right? I'm saying how many layers do you want to attach to this? We don't do this. To which the Gemara says, no. Kula chad gzerihi. The Gemara says it's all one gezerah. So what the Sinzabot says is as follows: that when Chazal went ahead and legislated on peros chanoshim min ha'ilam, that you're not allowed to eat fruit that falls off a tree, they included a number of things in that primary gezerah. A couple of things which resemble fruit falling off the tree. And one of those things which they initially included in that legislation, according to Rav Yosef at least, was a chicken that lays an egg on Shabbos. So it's not, so we'll say, the imagery, the Havamina was kind of, we start with the Dorei, so I can't pick a fruit off the tree. First layer of D'Rabbanan, can't eat fruit that falls off the tree. And then there's a second layer of D'Rabbanan, which says you can't eat an egg which is laid on Yom Tiv. And then that's Gezerah Gezerah. That's multiple levels of rabbinic legislation. We don't do that. Tush the Gemara says that's not what happened. What happened was, Darais, you can't eat a fruit off a tree. And then there was a D'Rabbanan. And the D'Rabbanan prohibited a number of different things, including that, and that is what? A chicken that lays an egg on Yom Tiv. You can't eat that egg because that egg resembles fruit that has fallen off the tree. Beautiful. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Gezerah Mishum Mashkin Shezavu. We'll say this is great. This is Mamash L'Sagi we're doing now in Smichas Chaver. It's a Gezerah of Mashkin Shezavu. What does this mean? You're not allowed to eat the egg because it falls into the category of juice which seeps out of fruit on Shabbos / Yom Tiv. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So what is mimashkin? So again, just the imagery is the same way. We'll see what the problem is. The same way that there's a quote unquote problem with juice which oozes out of a fruit on Shabbos, so too there's a problem with the egg, so to speak, that oozes out. That's the same. That's the imagery. The egg oozes out of the chicken on Shabbos as well, or Shabbos Yom Tiv. So the Gemara is like this. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye says, what's the issue with mashkin shezavu? Mashkin shezavu taimamai. What's the reason why you can't drink juice which oozes out of a fruit on Shabbos? Gzeira shema yischot. Oh, it's an issue that if we allow, so you have your bowl of grapes, right? You have your bowl of grapes, and juice oozes out of the grapes. You're not allowed to drink that juice on Shabbos. Why not? What are we concerned about? If we let you, chazara, right? Chazara. If we let you go ahead and drink the juice, what may come to happen? You may come to squeeze the grapes. And that's an Isser D'Oraisa. So the Gemara is asked the same question. He gufa gzera, va'ana nekov menigzer gzera l'gzera. So I don't understand. That by itself, drinking the juice is already a gzera. Now you want to put another gezerah on top of that you can't eat the egg because it's as if it oozed out of the mother, to which the Gemara says, Kula chad gezerah. Same answer as we gave before. Halacha l'may says all one gezerah. In other words, Rabbi says, so when Chazal legislated that you can't go ahead and drink the juice that oozes out of fruit lest you come to squeeze the fruit, they included a couple of different things in that initial gezerah. And according to Rabbi Yitzchak, they included an egg that was laid on Yom Tiv. Beautiful. So we'll say, here's what we have. So now we've come to a very important milestone in the sugya. We now have 4 different opinions as to how to understand the position or the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in the Mishnah, specifically trying to understand why Beis Hillel prohibits the consumption of the egg which the chicken lays on Yom Tiv. Remember again, so what are our 4 different opinions? We started with Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman wanted to suggest this is just a basic machlokes in muktzah. In muktzah. Right? So Rav Nachman says, halacha l'maisa, Beis Shammai has a more restrictive view of muktzah, like Beis Hillel has a more restrictive view of muktzah, like Rabbi Yehuda. And ultimately, again, Beis Shammai has a more relaxed view of muktzah, like Rabbi Shimon. That was Rav Nachman. Rabbah wanted to say this is an issue of hachana. Right, an issue of hachana, that when the chicken lays the egg on Yom Tiv, this is Yom Tiv that falls after Shabbos, and therefore it wasn't prepared properly. Good. Beis Hillel subscribes to the hachana de Rabbah, Beis Shammai does not. Rav Yosef, this is an issue of peros hanoshrim min ha'ilan, fruit that fell off of the tree. Rabbi Yitzchak, gzeira of mashkin shezavu. Those are the 4 different opinions. Here we go. Kulok Rav Nachman lo amri yisai. I understand why the other 3 opinions don't hold like Rav Nachman. Why not? Kikusham, because of the questions that we brought up. We'll say, remember again, what was the question we brought up on Rav Nachman? Rav Nachman, if you're really right that this is a machlokes about muktzah, then what? Why are you just arguing in the egg? It's also a question of what? It's also a shaila of what? The chicken itself. So why doesn't the Mishnah illustrate the machlokes with both the chicken and the egg? That was the kashan of Rav Nachman. Fine. So I understand everyone rejects Rav Nachman because of that question. Kira Abanami, Lo Amri Hachana Lestu. I understand also why the other opinions don't hold of Rabbah, because we'll say Rabbah is advancing an incredible chiddush. What's Rabbah's chiddush? That everything you're going to use on Yom Tiv must be actively prepared, right? And whatever that active preparation means, at least a designation, Mikan Ani Ochel, I'm going to eat from this. So they don't subscribe to that. That's Rabbah's chiddush. The other opinions don't subscribe to that. Ella, Rav Yosef, my time, Elo Amak Rabbi Yitzchak. But why doesn't Rav Yosef hold like Rabbi Yitzchak? Let's remember again, Rav Yosef said, you can't go ahead and eat the egg on Yom Tiv. Why? Gezerah mishum peiros hanoshim, because it resembles a fruit which fell off the tree. Aish, Rav Yosef, why don't you agree with Rabbi Yitzchak, right, who holds that it's an issue of mashkin shezabu, because it resembles juice oozing out of the fruit. So very simple. Amar lecha beitzah ochla upeiros ochla. Because at the end of the day, I think my comparison is better. A beitzah, an egg, is food, and again, Peiros are food. Lafuke mashkin to lavochla, as opposed to, let's say, the case of mashkin shezavu, that's liquid. So therefore, I'd rather compare the egg, which is food, to a case of peiros, which is food, and not to a case of mashkin, which is liquid. Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak, my time lo amar Rav Yosef. Rabbi Yitzchak, who holds that the issue of the egg is one of mashkin shezavu, why doesn't he hold like Rav Yosef that it's an issue of peiros hanoshrin? Amrlacha Beitzah belua umashkin beluin. I like comparing the egg case to the fruit juice case. Why? Because just like the juice is absorbed into the pre, so to what? The egg is absorbed into the mother. Lafuke peiros demiglu v'kaimu, as opposed to the case of the fruit, where the fruit is revealed, right? It's visible already from the beginning while it's still on the tree. Beautiful. Va'af Rabbi Yochanan savar gzera mishum mashkin shezav. So we'll say now we're introducing another thing. Even Rabbi Yochanan himself also agrees with Rabbi Yitzchak, namely that the issue of a beitzah shenolda biyamtiv is an issue of mashkin shezavu, which again Abosai means the reason Beis Hillel holds that you cannot eat an egg which the chicken lays on Yom Tiv is why? Because it's part of the gzera of juice which seeps out of fruit, right? It's part of that initial gzera of mashkin shezavu. Rabbi Yochanan also agrees with this. How do we know? Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda, u'mishanim. Because Rabbi Yochanan, interestingly enough, contrasted two positions of Rabbi Yehuda, and he answered it in the following way. Watch this. I will say, this is actually great. For those of us who are doing smichas chaver, we're literally learning this sugya now. This is the sugya. Listen to this. Tanan. Ain't sochten asa peiros lo hotzi mehen mashkin. You're not allowed to squeeze fruit on Shabbos in order to go ahead and extract the liquid. Right? I will say again, why is that? Because halacha l'maisa, again, that is the melacha of dash, or right, specifically called mefarik. Right, the malacha of dash is the malacha of threshing, when you go ahead and you separate out wheat from chaff. So the act of squeezing out liquid from the pre is the malacha of dash. Again, when it comes to liquid in the pre, it's more specifically called the tolda of mefarik. Okay, so you're not allowed to go ahead and squeeze fruit on Shabbos. Right, ve'im yatsume atzman. What happens if the juice comes out on its own? Right, I left grapes on the counter, and juice came out of it on its own. I didn't squeeze anything. Juice came out of it on its own. Ve'im yatsume atzman asurim. Ultimately, again, it is aser. That is the opinion of the Rabbanon. That even if you didn't squeeze the juice, but the juice came out on its own, it's aser. Rabbi Yehuda says, we'll say, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda says, im lo ochlon. It depends. What were the fruits designated as? If the fruits were designated for achila, for eating, im lo ochlon, hayotze mehen mutter. Then liquid which oozes out of the fruit is going to be mutter. Ve'im lamashkin, but if you designated that fruit for juicing purposes, hayotze mehen aser. Then ultimately, again, what comes out of them is aser. I will say, now there's a lot of qualifications to this halacha, right? The Gemara in Shabbos goes on to explain that they're not arguing over here by zeis and ba'anavim, grapes and olives. You make distinctions in halacha. We're not going to get into all of this right now. But the point over here is that Rabbi Yehuda says like this. So everyone agrees on the first part, which is you can't squeeze fruit on Shabbos. That everyone agrees with. Right? The machlokes piece is on juices which seep out on their own. The Rabbanon say Aser. Rabbi Yehuda says, it depends. What does it depend on? What are the fruits designated for? If they're designated for achila, for eating, then the juices, the svar is the juices which come out of them have the status of ochel, of food. If the fruit is designated for consumption for eating purposes, then the juice which oozes out of them is called food as well. If it's called food, it's not called a mashke, not subject to the gzeira of mashke and shezavu. If, however, again, the food is designated for juicing purposes, I'm going to juice it, I'm going to squeeze it, then ultimately the juices which seep out have the status of a mashke, of a drink, of liquid, and therefore halacha l'maisa falls under the gzeira. To which the Gemara says, Alma, so we'll say, so for our purposes here, if it's sechus beya, what do we take from this position? Alma, call ochlin Rabbi Huda ochla de ifrasu. And I will say, what comes out of here is as follows. So therefore, according to Rabbi Huda, here's the part we're focusing on for our Mesechus Beya purposes, which is, according to Rabbi Huda, if something is called food, right, food, anything that comes from it is also called what? Food. So therefore, you have your fruit, you set it aside, I'm going to eat it. I'm not going to juice, I'm going to eat it. The liquid that seeps out of that fruit is called food also. Okay, now watch this. Or minu, raise a kasha. Rabbi Huda also said, Masna Adam al Kalkala Shaperis Biyam Tavrishan Va'ochla B'Shnei. We'll say, get ready for this. This is Rosh Hashanah. This is the case of Rosh Hashanah. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Va'odor Rabbi Huda, this is incredible. Le'el Minei Tnam Seches Erevin, Rosh Hashanah, Shu Yorei Shema Tisaber, V'yu Shnei Yamim Tovim, Ma'ariv Adam Shnei Eruvin, the Kasaber Shtei Kedusha saying Echad Chol, V'echad Yom Tov, V'odin Heichos. So let's listen to this. Rabbi Huda says we have 2 days Rosh Hashanah. 2 days Rosh Hashanah. And Rabbi Huda says we know one of them is weekday and one of them is Yom Tov, right? We observe 2 days, but there's only really 1 day of Rosh Hashanah Midaraisa. So Rabbi Huda says, watch this. So the Gemara says, so here's the case. I have a basket of fruit. I forgot to tithe it before Yom Tov. So I want to be able to tithe it. So there's a process. Listen to this. What can you do? Essentially, designate your trumas and maestros in the basket on day 1 with a tanai. And the tanai goes like this. I separate this as truma gedola, separate this as maestros. Do all of your designations. You don't actively pull anything out, but you do all your designations. Excuse me. And what you say is, if today is Yom Tiv, my statement is meaningless. But if today is Chol, then my statement is meaningful. And on the second day, you do the same exact thing. And then you could eat the fruit. Why can you eat the fruit? Why? Because one of Shach, what? One of those days was Chol. Which means on one of those days, I made a proper designation. Listen to this. V'chein, Beitzah shenolda b'rishon, tochal b'sheni. Similarly, if you have an egg that the chicken laid on the first day, you can't eat it on the first day, but you can eat it on the second day. Why? B'manav Shach. If the first day is Yom Tiv, the second day is Chol, you could eat the egg. And if the first day was Chol, and the second day is Yom Tiv, the egg was technically permitted the previous day anyway. That was saying, what do you see from here? B'sheni in b'rishon lo. Ultimately, again, you're only allowed, Rabbi Huda says, you're only allowed to eat the egg on the second day. Now, here's the problem. In the first brisa, or I should say in the first Mishnah, when it comes to schitas peiros, Rabbi Huda's klal was what? Anything that comes from food is food. If that's the case, then what should be the status of an egg which comes from a chicken? Food. If it's food, then when should it be permitted? Immediately. And yet Rabbi Huda doesn't say that. Rabbi Huda doesn't say it's permitted immediately. Rabbi Huda says it's going to be permitted day 2. Because by the time you get to day 2, either way, the egg should be mutter. To which the Gemara says, Umeshani Rabbi Yochanan muchlefes hashita. And Rabbi Yochanan said you have to change around the shitas. Because Rabbi Huda is contradicting himself. So he must have had the attribution must be wrong. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Umeshani Rabbi Yochanan muchlefes hashita, shitas hamisha dein sochtin, veifach Rabbi Huda d'Rabbanan. So comes along Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says that halacha l'maisa you have to switch around the positions of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan in the Mishnah by schitas peiros. And that Rabbi Yehuda really holds that halacha l'maisa, anytime juices ooze out, it's going to be problematic. Now the fact that Rabbi Yochanan is contrasting this Mishnah of Beitzah with the Mishnah of Mashkin Shezavu, the fact that we're aligning those two tells you that what? The Gemara says, I'm sorry. The fact that we're contrasting the Mishnah of Be'ah with the Mishnah of Mashkin Shezavu tells us that Rabbi Yochanan holds that the problem with Be'ah, the problem with an egg, is a problem of mashkin shezavu. Because otherwise you wouldn't be contrasting these two cases. I just want to point out, remember, all that's happening over here is that the Gemara is trying to suggest that Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Rabbi Yitzchak. Right? Rabbi Yitzchak wanted to suggest that the issue of Beitzah shenolda b'yamtiv is an issue of mashkin shezavu. Rabbi Yochanan also agrees with that. The fact that Rabbi Yochanan frames the contradiction between mashkin shezavu and Beitzah shenolda b'yamtiv tells us that he holds the issue of Beitzah shenolda b'yamtiv is an issue of mashkin shezavu. Incredible. So Ravina says no. Now leave Rabbi Huda where he is in the case of mashkin shezavu. Rabbi Huda does agree to that. Remember, we'll say so. Rabbi Huda is as stated. Namely, what does Rabbi Huda hold? That Allah Chalamayis, everyone agrees. What can't you do? What can't you do on Shabbos? Can't squeeze fruit. Right? What's the machlokes case? If the juice oozes out on its own. And Rabbi Huda will say, what's the status of the juice when it oozes out on its own? What's the status? It depends. What does it depend on? What were the fruit designated for? If the fruit was designated for juicing, the juices are problematic. Eating, the juices are permitted. So Ravina says, don't change anything around. Watch this. Rabbi Huda in the second Mishnah, right by the case of Rosh Hashanah, was coming along and trying to appeal to the logic of the Rabbanon. And watch this. Rabbi Huda says as follows: Lididi, afilu barishon namisharya. Rabbi Huda says, according to me, when the chicken lays an egg on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, that egg is permitted immediately. Why? We'll say why. This is so beautiful. Not like in a hashkafic sense, but like in a right. Why is the egg permitted on day number one? Why is it permitted? Why? Because what does Rabbi Huda holds? Anything that comes from food has the status of food. Rabbi said, let's just make sure we're solid on the logic. Where do we know that from Rabbi Huda? Because Rabbi Huda holds that if you have a fruit and the fruit was set aside for eating and juices ooze out of that fruit, what's the status of the juices? Permitted. Why? Because anything that comes from food is food. So Rabbi Huda says, for me, when a chicken lays an egg on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you can eat it immediately. Right? Now again, this also presupposes that what type of chicken are we talking about? Right. Tarnagolas hamidas la'achila. Right? It has to be for consumption. Because then that which comes from it is called food. That right? Otherwise, if it's an egg-laying chicken, then by definition, presumably I don't have in mind to eat that on Yom Tov. Right? So we'll say, so now watch this. Rabbi Huda will say, for me, chicken lays the egg on first day of Rosh Hashanah, we're good to go. Scrambled eggs for breakfast. Right? We're good to go. We can eat it immediately. Right? The Gemara says, Du'uchla d'ifrasu. Because again, food, anything that comes from food is called food. Ela l'didachu odeli mihas devisheni sharya d'shtei kidusha saying. But Rabbi Huda says, Rabbanan, you should at least agree with me that what? When should the egg become permitted by? At least by when? Second day. Because by the time you roll around to the second day of Rosh Hashanah, Mimanav Shach, the egg should be permitted. Why? If the first day was Yom Tiv, then what? Second day is Chol. If the first day was Chol, then the egg was really laid on a weekday anyways. So by the time you get to the second day, it should be permitted. Rabbanan say, watch this. And it's a girl, they're doing this sugi now just a few days before Rosh Hashanah. The Rabbanan say, no, Rabbi Huda, we disagree, not so much with your egg policies, right? We disagree with your categorization of the 2-day Kiddusha of Rosh Hashanah. You see, I will say, this is a yisodistic machlokes by Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Huda holds that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are like any other 2-day Yom Tiv, where one day is Yom Tiv, one day is Chol, but we keep them both misafek. The Rabbanan say that's not the nature of Rosh Hashanah. Remember again, if you look at Rashi, well, before you get to Rashi, remember again, I will say, why is Rosh Hashanah 2 days even in Eretz Yisrael? It's not a Sveika Diyoma issue, right? It's not like every other 2-day Yom Tov that we observe in the diaspora, which we do so because of a calendrical doubt. Remember again, 2-day Rosh Hashanah was about something totally different. Was the fact that on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the Eidim would show up. You can't declare Rosh Hashanah like any other Rosh Chodesh until the witnesses show up. The Gemara Maseches Rosh Hashanah declares that there were circumstances where the Eidim would show up late in the day. So what ended up happening was they had carbonic confusion. Which carbon do we offer up? Which shira do we offer up? So in order to go ahead and avoid any of that, they made Rosh Hashanah into 2 days. But the way we categorize the Kedusha of Rosh Hashanah is what we call a Yom Arichta. Rosh Hashanah is considered to be one long day. It is the only 48-hour day which exists in halacha. So Rabbi Huda wants to say that Rosh Hashanah is 2 different days, and one is Kodesh, one is Chol. We keep them both out Safei. So Rabbi Huda says, Rabbana, come on, the eggs got to be permitted by day number 2, because B'manav Shach, if first day was Yom Tiv, second day is Chol, egg is permitted. If first day was Chol, then the egg was really laid on a weekday, second day certainly permitted. And the Rabbanan say, no, Rabbi Yehuda, we fundamentally disagree with the way you understand the nature of Rosh Hashanah. It's not Shtei Kedushos, it's not 2 days, it's Kedusha Achas. Look at Rashi, Kedusha Achasi, V'lo damu l'shar Yomim Tovim. Rosh Hashanah is not like any other Yom Tiv. Because we don't keep a second day Rosh Hashanah out of doubt. Because they both say, even when the Beis Hamikdash stood, they were keeping 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So it's what's called in halacha, it's what we call a Yoma Arichta. One long day. One long day. Good. One long day. There's so much to talk about, by the way, on the concept of the Yom Arichta, because what you see by Rosh Hashanah, is something very interesting, which is that the concept of Yom Arichta, of one long day, begins as a halachic construct. But the truth is, it very quickly morphs into a hashkafic construct of Rosh Hashanah as well, as to what the avoda of Rosh Hashanah is. Rosh Hashanah, let's say, sometimes the key to accomplishment in life is time management. We know, right? There are actually enough hours in the day to do all the things you need to do. Maybe not do all the things you want to do, but there is enough time in the day to do all the things I need to do. But I have to know how to manage my time. Let's say, so sometimes, the worst thing we say is, there's no time, there's not enough time. So, what's interesting is what Rosh Hashanah says is, you could pull 48 hours out of a 24-hour period if you maximize your time. Right? Rosh Hashanah is Yom Arichta, it's a 48-hour day. Because sometimes, again, if I really put my mind to it, I can maximize my time. I could pull 48 hours out of 24 hours if I'm disciplined, if I'm directed, and if I know what it is that I need to accomplish. Again, but more about that over Yom Tov. Ravina Beit Ravula. So now we're not finished. Comes along Ravina. Back to our chicken. Right? Ravina Beit Ravula. Beitzah. Ravina says, no, actually we're talking about a chicken that is set aside to go ahead and lay eggs. Now Rashi points out over here, Ravina is coming to comment on Rabbi Huda. And he says, what are we talking about over here? A chicken that is set aside to lay eggs. For Rabbi Huda, l'tamei de'isle muktzah. And Rabbi Huda, again, has his general reasoning, ultimately, again, because he holds of a more narrow description or a more narrow definition, ultimately of muktzah. And not real, Ravina wants to suggest that Rabbi Huda's issue is not one of mashkin shazavu, but rather his issue ultimately is of muktzah. Beautiful. So we'll say, now let's go back to Meisvei. So the Gemara raises a kasha. Now we'll say, now ultimately, the Meisvei now is going back to the fundamental machlokas regarding the fundamental machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So we'll say, so now we've effectively had 4 interpretations of the machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Now what we're going to do is as follows. We're going to raise a couple of questions on the Mishnah, and we're going to try to plug in the various opinions into explaining these questions. Here we go. Meisvei. Echad Beitzah shnalda b'yamtiv, shv'shabes ve'echad Beitzah shnalda b'yamtiv, ein metaltal osa. Whether the chicken laid the egg on Shabbos or on Yom Tiv, halacha l'maisa, you're not allowed to carry it. You're not allowed to move it. For example, you can't go ahead and move it. We'll say it's actually interesting. You could use an egg as like a bottle stopper. Interesting, right? So to cover up the kli, this is great. You can't use the egg to support your bed. Right? Remember again, if you go ahead and you put the egg, what's the right word? Standing up, right? An egg could actually go ahead and sustain an interesting amount of weight, right? So you can't go ahead and use it to prop up your bed. What can you do? So you have an egg the chicken laid the egg on Shabbos or Yom Tov, it's muktzah. It's muktzah. So you can't move it to cover a kli. You can't move it to support your bed. What can you do? You could go ahead and cover it. Right? You could cover it with a kli, ultimately so that it shouldn't break. So I just want to point out, by the way, you're thinking to yourself, what's the big chiddush that you can move the kibbutz? Remember again from Hilchos Muktzah? One of them, there's a fundamental machlokes in Hilchos Muktzah. We saw this back in Erev and in Shabbos. Namely, are you allowed to move a kli to serve something that itself is muktzah? So that's a whole machlokes in halakha. It's not machlokes in halakha. In halakha we pass and you can, but in the Gemara it's whole machlokes. In any event, the Gemara says usveika asura. Now watch this. Let's say there's a suffix concerning the egg. Now we're assuming right now that the suffix the Gemara is talking about did the chicken lay the egg on Yom Tiv or during the week, right? On Shabbos or during the week. We assume that's the suffix. Usveika asura. So again, if you're not sure when the egg came into the world, you have to treat it stringently. Vimnis arba be'elef kulan asuros. Wow. And if that egg got mixed with 1,000 other eggs, all of the eggs are asur. All of the eggs are asur. Meaning that the egg which is laid on Yom Tiv is not buttal to the rest of the eggs. Well, so let's analyze this. Now, by the way, in that last case, when the egg gets mixed in with all the other eggs, all the eggs are asur. So what does that mean? Asur when? Asur when? Just for Shabbos Yom Tov. It doesn't mean forever, right? It's just like, again, if you hold that Beitzah Shenolda B'Yom Tov is asur, it only means it's asur taf Yom Tov. So if you have an egg that was laid on Yom Tov and it got mixed in with 1,000 other eggs, and we say all the eggs are asur till after Yom Tov. So we'll say, so let's analyze this. Bishlam of the Rabba, Da'amr Mishum Achana, Have Sveika Daraisa. So we'll say, we're focusing now on the case of suffix, right? So the Mishnah said, actually the Beitzah said, that halacha l'maisa, sveika asura. Right? So if you have a suffix egg, that ultimately, again, it's going to be asur. So again, remember, we're assuming what's the suffix? Was the egg laid on Yom Tiv or during the week? Right? So I understand, Bishlama l'Rabba Damar Mishum Achana, Havisika Daraisa, V'chosvika Daraisa l'Chumra. According to Rabba, I understand. Because according to Rabba, also said, Midaraisa, everything you're going to use on Yom Tiv or on Shabbos must what? Must be actively designated and prepared on a weekday. On a weekday. So therefore, again, if you have a suffix egg, this is a suffix Daraisa l'Chumra. El Rav Yosef, Rav Yitzchak, Dar Mishum Gzeira, Svega D'Rabbanani, V'chal Svega D'Rabbanan L'Kula. But also according to Rav Yosef, Rav Yitzchak, who hold that what? That the issue of Beitzah Shenolda B'Yom Tov is under the Gzeira of what? Either Peiros Hanoshrin, fruit that fell off the tree, or Mashkin Shazavu, or juice that oozed out of a fruit. Those are D'Rabbanans. If that's the case, if you have a suffix, whether the egg was born on Yom Tov or not, that's a suffix D'Rabbanan. And what's the suffix D'Rabbanan? Suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Amarle, no. Seifa son the suffix treifa. No, very interesting. The suffix actually that the Beitzah is talking about is not talking about a suffix if the chicken laid the egg on Shabbos or Yom Tov. The suffix is the animal from which the egg came from a treifa or not. Right? So in other words, we're not sure about the status. Remember, an egg that comes from a treifa could be problematic. That's the suffix. One second. If that's the case, that we're not sure. Rashi says over here, suffix treifa, suffix nolda mitana golas treifa, v'la b'yom tiv kai. So actually, interestingly enough, that case of suffix is not a yom tiv case. That case of suffix is actually a situation where we're not sure if the animal is a treifa. To which the Gemara said, 1 second, Ihaki ima seifa, nis arva be'elef kulan asuros. The next part of the Beitzah said, if that suffix egg gets mixed in with 1,000 other eggs, then what? They're all asur. To which the Gemara says, I don't understand. I amr bishlama b'safek yom tiv safek chol have davar sheyesh lo matirin v'chal davar sheyesh lo matirin afilu be'elef lo batal. We'll say very quickly, davar sheyesh lo matirin means something that is asur now, but going to become mutter later on. We have a principle in halacha that a davar sheyesh lo matirin is not batal in a mixture. And the svara is very simple. What's the svara? Bittul is a mechanism that halacha uses when there is no other way to resolve doubt. right? But if there's another way to resolve doubt, like what? Or like how? Wait. Just wait a little bit, and there's no doubt. Wait till after Yom Tov, and there's no issue. Then ultimately, again, we don't rely on bittul. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. When we say if this suffix egg gets mixed in with 1,000 other eggs, it's not batal because of shishla matirin. That makes sense of what? That makes sense if you go ahead and you say they were talking about the suffix of the egg, whether or not it's a Yom Tov egg or not. Suffix treifa. But if you say that the egg that we're talking about is from a suffix treifa animal, then davar sheish lo matirini. I'm sorry. So then, davar she'ein lo matirini v'tibato ruba. Ultimately, I'm say you see again an egg that comes from an animal which is a suffix treifa is what? Is ultimately again is not a. I should say differently. I'm sorry. It's not that the animal is a suffix treifa. That's incorrect. It's that we're not sure if this egg came from the treifa animal or the whole animal, right? So there's a suffix on the egg. Is it a treifa egg or not? We'll say that's not a davar sheish lo matirin, right? Because that egg never becomes permitted. Now, if that egg never becomes permitted, then what mechanism should you be able to rely on? Bittul. And therefore, again, if it falls into a mixture, it should be batal and permitted immediately. We'll say this is great. So a little bit of a detour on the halachos of bittul. Maybe you'll say, well, an egg is different. An egg is chashuv, and therefore it's not batal. We'll say there is this constant halacha, as we will see, that certain items possess such incredible individual importance that what? That halacha lamaisa, it's not batal in a mixture. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says something so beautiful. He says, this is why a Jew is never batal barov. Meaning what? Let's say again, I look at my life, and I say, I have rov averus. Right? The majority of things I do are averus. So we should say that my mitzvahs are batal barov. Mitzvahs are batal barov. To which the Rebbe says so beautifully, the mitzvah of a Yid, the mitzvah of a Jew, is a davar chashuv. There's nothing more important than the mitzvah of a Jew. And a davar chashuv is never batal. Afilu be'elef. And that is why halacha l'maaseh, even if unfortunately I'm contending with rov averos, a majority of averos, I am a davar chashuv. My mitzvahs are a davar chashuv, and therefore never batal. So the Gemara says, Hani chalaman damar kol shedarko limno shaninu. We all say, this is so much good stuff here. Let's listen to this. So that makes sense. So I'll say, listen to this machlokes. Let me tell you the machlokes, then we'll plug it in. There's a machlokes of how do you define a davar chashuv, right? Let's accept the principle that if something has incredible, heightened, individualistic importance, it is never batal. It's never batal. Okay, let's accept that. Let's accept that principle. Now the shaila is what? Shaila is what? How do you define individualistic importance? Says machlokes. The machlokes is like this. Everyone will agree that an item that is never sold in quantity, never sold in bulk, only sold as individual units, is called a davar chashuv. The shaila is, what about an item that is sometimes sold in bulk and sometimes sold in individual units? So a good example of that would be an egg, right? Sometimes, right, it's normal to purchase an egg, right? 3 eggs, 4 eggs. And then it's also sometimes normal to purchase eggs in bulk, right? In which case, there might be 1 more, might be 1 less, might be 3 more. And again, that's okay. That's accepted in the marketplace. So we'll say, listen to this. This is the machlokes. Maybe you'll say that an egg is chashuv, and therefore it's never batal in a mixture. Kol shadarko limno shaninu. Well, the lesson of kol shadarko means anything that is often sold in individual units. Not always sold in individual units, but often sold in individual units. Therefore, again, an egg is often sold in individual units, but sometimes sold in bulk as well. So if you say that a davar chashuv is defined as something that is sometimes sold in individual units, then an egg could be a davar chashuv. Allah. But according to Bina, it says eshed darko limnos means the only item that is a davar chashuv is what? Something that is only sold in individual units. It's never sold in bulk. Ultimately, again, what is there to say? Halacha l'maisa, an egg would not satisfy that criteria. So we'll say, we'll have to stop over here. We'll pick up in Yahrzeit Hashem with so much to do with this sugya tomorrow. Again, it's going to be quite fascinating. Another beautiful Gemara tomorrow. Let's say shkoyach.
If you know, the chicken can lay his egg every day? Why can't you say tomorrow I'm going to lay his egg?
Oh, so we're going to see that sugya. We're going to see that sugya that according to Rabbah,